Did you know that nearly 70% of construction disputes stem from contract compliance issues? Many construction projects face delays and cost overruns due to inadequate understanding of contract compliance. In this episode, you'll learn about contract compliance and workflows in the construction industry with Maegan Spivey, a construction contract specialist at Document Crunch, highlighting its importance in ensuring project success. I'm your host, James Taylor, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast. Before we get started, here's a quick word from our sponsor for this episode, PPI, a Kaplan company.
PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode.
It's now time for our civil engineering conversation of the week with Maegan Spivey. Maegan, welcome to Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you to your current role as contract specialist at Document Crunch?
Absolutely. So I started my career out in construction accidentally. I graduated during the recession, and the only places that were hiring were construction companies. And so I started out in construction and just kind of started learning. I had every intention of getting out as soon as the economy picked back up. And here I am almost 15 years later. And I actually got into contracts because it was just a faster way to do my job. I had a project manager that I was kind of hammering for stuff. He was holding up all my work and on a particular project. And one day he came in and was like, "Why are you asking me all these questions? You know, it's everything is in the contract, and I uploaded the contract for you." And I was like, "Hey, buddy, this is your job. Just answer my questions." And he goes, "No, let's sit down together." And so he walked me through the whole contract. And so I finally realized, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I don't have to wait on any project managers. I don't have to wait on anybody anymore for a lot of my questions. I can just go straight to the contract. So for years, I just was reading contracts, and I started reading more and more of contracts because I realized that there was so much information related to my job in there, and it was all how we had agreed to do business with another company. And so from there, I actually married that project manager that taught me how to read contracts. And then also, just kind of, I started learning more and more about contracts. I didn't really think anything of it. And then a few years later, actually an engineering company that had grown into doing turnkey work in the energy market was struggling with their contracts. So I came on just to kind of help them kickstart the process. And I ended up staying on for a while. And that's how I got into contract management. And I got connected with Document Crunch actually through LinkedIn. I was trying to get I really saw this vision of, helping companies who don't have a good contracts process, being someone, especially companies that don't have a need for somebody full time, but could benefit with somebody with contract experience, helping them when they have a contract come in. And so I started posting on LinkedIn thinking I was going to get clients eventually, leave my full-time work and just do fractional contract management. And I connected with Josh Levy, who's our CEO, and it was weird to connect with somebody about have all the same opinions on contracts in our industry and have it be an attorney too, to see that need that more people needed contract help, that it didn't just belong with attorneys and we didn't just need to ignore them until something bad happened. We could revamp how the industry was doing contracts. And so from that conversation with Josh, just kind of networking off LinkedIn, I ended up coming over to Document Crunch, and I'm so excited about the work that we do. And so it was a really good fit. Like, I love contracts and being able to help make a positive change in the industry versus only helping one company at a time. It feels like I'm just very thankful. So that's how I got Document Crunch.
Yeah, I love that. I have to say, I have not heard too many people that have said, I love contracts. But hearing that from you, I can I can feel your passion about it. And you brought up some good stuff, good things there. And we're going to dive into it further. But, as engineers, making sure you understand the contract, not just turning to the attorney and saying, hey, is this what we want? It's a huge part of what you can be as an engineer. So you describe yourself as a construction contract encourager. Can you elaborate on what that means and how you approach making construction contracts less intimidating for industry professionals?
Well, I think that there's so many things. I mean, I do love contracts now. I just want to clarify. I did not
You did
start.
not like it before. Okay.
I did not start. It was, it's one of those things where out of need, you grow into love something. I should have worn my I Heart contract shirt for this, but what it is I think that there are so many ways we can approach it, how to make contracts better. I think part of it is getting eyes on it. A lot of people, there's that common philosophy. There's several common philosophies in talking to people that I think probably are hurting more than helping. And one is that sign it and put it in the drawer. Yeah. Don't touch it after you've signed it. There's also that we have a great relationship. Well, you have a great relationship until you don't have a great relationship. And if you look at many of the contracts, I think a lot of people are surprised by the very one-sided nature when they actually start reading it. And then there's also this threat that maybe like we won't get the work if we try to push back or anything like that. And I think that we need to look at the process of of relationships in our industry that, if we're going through this wonderful process before we go to contract, and then we try to make some reasonable changes, if that gets you like really bad attitudes and really kind of that anti-collaborative spirit, that is probably something we need to think about too when we think about choosing who we're going to work with and who we're not. If we get a constraint of resources and we only can pick a few people who we're going to do business with, that I think that using how people approach making changes to the contract also needs to change. And then my big pie in the sky, I love the legal design front that is coming through contracts. It's kind of hit the software as a service industry. So you can see a lot of contract thought leaders on LinkedIn discussing legal design. And legal design is kind of getting to those not just reasonable terms that facilitate doing better business deals, but also making contracts easier to read so that the people who are trying to use the contracts to conduct business can actually understand. Yeah. And so that's part of why I love Document Crunch is that there's, as we're kind of, I hope, moving to more business friendly, more relationship driven, more focus on the deal and memorializing those good relationships and contracts. There is so much, these tools that are available now. We have there's a way to simplify right now. So even if you don't have a contract where somebody has made changes to their template to reflect maybe some of those legal design concepts, everyday people who are not trained in contracts can understand the language that's in their contracts, can find what they need faster. There's so much now that we can do while we're waiting for, maybe some more changes to come into contracts in our industry.
I like that. I think a lot of times, and I think you brought it up a little bit, a lot of times when you get that first contract, that first contract is really in the favor of whoever created that contract. It's not necessarily a win-win contract. It's a document that protects whoever was the one that created that contract, and rightfully so, right? I mean, that's what they're trying to do is they're trying to protect themselves. Yes. But when it comes down to it, that contract has to be workable between the two parties. And I think that's where, it's been nice over the years where certain agencies have come up with, standardized documents, whether it's AIA or EJD, those other types of things that are out there that kind of make it a little bit easier to work through, that, hey, it's not just a one-sided approach. We're in this together to win.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that balance too, this idea that, if somebody reads through their own contract and they realize what they're being obligated to, suddenly that great relationship doesn't feel so great anymore. So definitely that balance facilitates a better relationship too.
Yeah, I like that. With your extensive experience, you've done both general contracting and subcontractor roles. How do you see the difference in contract management between these two perspectives?
That's a really good question. So I think, on the subcontractor side, I get a lot more of, oh, you actually read it. If you try to make changes, wait, you actually read this? Oh, well, we've never had anybody had a problem. Nobody's had a problem with this before. So there's a lot more resistance, I think, because you're making problems where that's what it, you feel like when you try to suggest changes and make red lines, is this idea that you're just creating problems. And, I talk to other people who have done contracts for general contractors, and, they kind of there's this stigma that, we're going to have problems with this sub. And my experience, though, as also on the general contracting side, reviewing subcontractor red lines, is that a lot of times I'm like, whoa, this sub is on it. Right. They have their processes down, so there's this stigma that on the general contracting side. But even on the general contracting side, when we'd work with the owner, there's still that, you can get some operational changes a lot of times, but it's really hard to get those, those big kind of intangible big risk ones like indemnities and consequential damages. It's harder to make changes on those. And so even if you're a general contractor and you're trying to get those good terms, good terms, you're actively trying to work to better contract outcomes. A lot of times, there's still that aspect of like, well, if you want the work, sign it.
Right.
And so I think there's, this, so I guess, on the subcontractor side, sometimes there's this idea that you're making problems when really, you're just taking care of your business in a more holistic sense. And then on the general contractor side, there's a stigma that like, oh, they're not even trying to get better changes. And it's like, well, they're trying to get work too. So there's kind of some empathy on both sides that would probably help the process.
So with that, you kind of brought up the fact of like, subcontractor, if you want the work, just sign it, move on. I guess if it comes down to that, then it's also identifying the risk on the back end of what does that mean for your business if you do have to take on that risk.
You are exactly right. And sometimes you choose to take work because the project is right in your wheelhouse. It's a great project for you for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons why you would still accept a contract. I worked with an attorney once who called it the plug your nose and sign it contracts, where it's like really awful, but maybe it's a lower risk project, or maybe, there are tons of reasons why you would choose to accept a contract with somebody who said maybe, oh, we won't accept changes or those kinds of things. But the great thing is that it doesn't have to end there, with that one project or anything like that. You still need to know, though, where your risks are in the contract. You still need to know what you signed up for. And then also there's the other element of complying. So, there's this doing what you say you're going to do. So even if it's a really risky contract, just by doing your part, and so you have to know your part, but then do your part.
Right.
And you can't do that if you haven't read the contract.
Yeah, it's great points. How do you ensure contract compliance within the workflows you manage, and what tools or techniques do you find most effective?
So when I was doing contract management, how would I manage compliance? Part of it is being able to, it starts before the contract is signed, which is making sure I'm communicating with the people who perform the work. So understanding that it's not all just the terms and conditions, it's also the ability to do the work. So making sure I understand the project or the work that's going to be done specifically so that we can see where we're out of sync before the contract is signed. Because I found that a lot of people are more willing to accept changes when you can articulate why or why not this will work.
Right.
So not just compliance doesn't just start after the project is signed. And also, making sure that we're having a good communication with the people who are executing the work. So whether it is professional services, back in the day when I was working for the engineering company, making sure that lines up first. And also any sort of friction is making sure I'm open to feedback and hearing that friction so that we can address that in the contract and future work. But then also after it's signed, there's a lot of, I think part of it was accessibility, prior to it, what I can see document crunch solving now is a lot of what I was doing during projects. So what does the contract say about this? And so reducing the barriers, because really, I think that a lot of times when I talk to people after the contract was signed, it was more that they didn't want to have to go find all the information, the relevant information, compile it, and then make it actionable.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of tools out there now, like Document Crunch. That's one of my big things. That's why I'm so passionate.
Is that the biggest tool right there? I mean, that's an easy one to say right there, right? Is that the tool that's the most effective, right?
Because it does what you would look for somebody else to do, but then you don't have to wait on an email response. It's right there. You can validate it. So I think a lot of the times what people were looking for answers for during the project, or even the accessibility, like, oh, I don't want to bother them, they're so busy. There's no loss. There's nothing, you're not losing any time. You're not losing any, you're not cashing any favors to get answers straight out of the contract, which I think is so valuable. But that is part of it, as a human, if you're a human who's doing, performing some sort of contract help for your company, that approachability, making people feel comfortable being able to ask questions and know that they're not going to be judged for their lack of knowledge. Right. Like what I was solving for projects, I think right now can also be solved with technology. So if you're a person without the technology, be approachable, be ready to teach and help. And then if you have the technology, know that there's, you can get the question answered right then. And also you can get it explained really fast. If you don't understand a concept, there's plenty of tools. This was my challenge when I was trying to learn contracts, is that there were no large language models. There weren't a lot of resources. And so I didn't understand. I was like, how does this apply to me? What does this even mean? And so that legalese can get stripped away and you can learn. And so whether you're a human or whether you're leveraging technology, part of the compliance workflow is understanding the language and getting the help when you need it.
So you brought up technology, and I think one of the biggest pieces of technology that's always at the forefront of people's minds today is AI. So what role does AI play in transforming contract workflows in the construction industry?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. AI is such a huge buzzword, and really AI, the great thing about AI is freeing up humans to do more of what they're good at. And I think that's the core of the value of AI is not to take your job, but rather to make people do more of what they love. And Jeff Sample and actually Josh Bone of Electri, they both have this example of that when automatic teller machines, so ATMs, came out. There was this thought that what are tellers going to do if there's an ATM outside? What are they going to do? You're taking away their jobs. And in fact, what actually happened was job satisfaction went up, pay went up because they were doing more complex and doing more work that was meaningful. And so that as we look at what contracts can do, there's so much information in there about how we manage projects, how we manage risk. And these AI can do so many amazing things. And the way to get the most out of it is to really look at what you need it to do. And for contracts, a lot of what we can do right now is helping understand the language, helping not only to find, but organize and then give you, make that information usable. So those steps, are there. And then as it grows, what can we take off humans' plates? There's so many great applications of technology, and it's only just beginning as the whole industry starts to learn more about, hey, can we use it here? Can we use it there? But also it's part of identifying too. Part of it is identifying what your our VP of product, he always says, what problem are you trying to solve? So it's going to be the most practical. And the thing is, contracts are a pain point for a lot of companies.
Right.
So as that grows out, it's not just limited to contracts, but contracts are a huge pain point for companies.
Yeah.
And so how do we reduce that time and put it in its, with AI applications around contracts, we can start making it, especially once the contract is signed, so much of it's facilitating other goals and other problems that you're trying to solve.
Sure.
So putting it in its proper proportion compared to the job that you have to get done.
We talked a little bit about, the surprise from general contractors when a subcontractor provides comments on a contract. What common pitfalls do you see when construction professionals do not thoroughly read through the contracts, and how can they avoid these issues?
When some common pitfalls when they don't read their contracts, lots. There's a lot of profit loss because they didn't budget for certain things that their contract described. Right. I know that there's so discrepancies too. Like there's a discrepancy between the documents and then you don't follow the contract, rework, and also unreasonable risk, things that are way outside of things that you should be responsible for, you're suddenly paying for if something bad happens. And so I think that there's just getting to that profit loss and even the worst, the catastrophic, which is shutting down your business.
Right. Yeah, which would obviously be the worst of the worst of all of that. And yeah, I mean, contracts have different things in there. Some of them stipulate, QA/QC procedures. Some of them stipulate, insurance requirements. And if you don't read through, I mean, those are just some real easy ones. But if you don't read through those, you don't know what the expectation is related to that contract. And so, making sure you should never sign a contract without reading it. I mean, that's just in life, not just the construction profession, but just in life, right? Don't sign anything before reading it. And then it's, understanding is the bigger factor there. Cause, like you said earlier, some of that jargon that can be used in contracts can be really tough to understand.
Oh yeah. And that's part of the problem, is that once the legalese is stripped away and you understand what it's actually saying, suddenly you're like, I would have never agreed to this. Right. But it was masked in layers of legalese. So definitely a barrier to entry.
Yeah. How do you see the role of contracts evolving in energy solutions and commercial contracting, especially with the increasing emphasis on sustainable practices?
That's really good. So it's interesting. Energy is a unique market. And as it's been the last few years where I spent my career before Document Crunch, because it's this interesting combination of engineering and construction. Because of the licensing requirements, you have to pull in some construction people, and also to get the work done efficiently. There's this that combination of construction, but then also the engineering deliverables and the guarantees and all that stuff. And I think what's really interesting is that with sustainability on the rise, I'm seeing that my husband's still in energy. And so I can see that there's a lot of initiatives to reduce energy. And so there's that bringing in the consultant to try to sell more projects. And this idea, though, that there is a lot of opportunity for contractors who are willing to learn and grow and start to specialize in that type of work, because this, like we talked about, sometimes you take work because you sign on for bad work, or not bad work, but you know what I mean?
Yep.
And you sign on for work because you need to. But when you're a specialist and you've kind of really niched down, I know in energy, it was harder to find the people to perform work who could do the work. And so they had a lot more kind of power with the GCs, because the GCs want to keep them happy because they're good.
There's only so many that you can go to.
Exactly. So, there is a high desire to keep that relationship positive and good. And so I think it's interesting that these aspects of building are going to come into, how do we build to save more energy? Because energy, it's never just, turning off the lights. There's also the strain on the power grids, and there's the infrastructure that goes with it. I can convert to an electric car, but are there chargers? Are there, is there enough power to even charge the chargers?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's all these factors in energy that are kind of gathering together. And so there's a lot of opportunities for anybody willing to specialize. There's also the building considerations that are coming out of it, and the rules and regulations that even traditional construction is going to have to start complying with, and just a different way of thinking about, like my brother, he's a mechanical engineer. And so his degree took him so far, but then he had to really specialize in energy. So there's just a whole world to learn, but it's going to start impacting a lot more areas of our country and, the industry at large too.
Yeah, that's really, really good points. And and I guess especially as more, net specialists and niche type people come on, there's going to be less of an advantage when it comes to the contract negotiation, because there's going to be more people available to assist in that work.
Yes, that's true. But hopefully it will mean, before that happens, my hope is that so many people have tried to push back that any areas of like extreme disagreement, they've already kind of changed their template. This is my hope anyway. They've kind of changed their template already to facilitate attracting and retaining better partners in the work, that sticks around.
So what final piece of advice can you share with the listeners on how they can better leverage AI tools to streamline contract management while ensuring they don't overlook critical details that could lead to compliance issues?
That's a great question. I think part of it is having a consistent process, kind of codifying. I think it's important to codify, and it's a lot of work up front. But one of the things that I really like about the work that Document Crunch is doing is that AI is only one part or one component. The rest is kind of helping to get a workflow, to memorialize a workflow so that there is transparency across the consistency. Like, this is what we're looking for every time. This is what we need to know for this project or this specific work. And I think that and having somebody own the process, having somebody, maybe it's not their full-time job, maybe they only do it when there's a contract, but just that idea that AI can help that finding, and especially in the review portion, speeding that up. What you're already looking for, you can find it a lot faster. And if you know what issues you have, it's only as good, like whatever AI or whatever software you're using, getting that in and getting that process solidified so that you can start focusing on, okay, now we've got this process down, get it signed faster, and then start relying on the contract more because it doesn't take as much time. So the time savings that by implementing something, you always got to make a little investment for contracts, but the idea that that's going to come back around in exponential time savings, and especially the technology is getting better all the time. People are tuning in to solving problems, and AI is a powerful way to do that. So I guess all that to say that do a little bit more work up front and reap the benefits across risk management, profit management, all because it's all tied to your contract.
It's now time for our CE Hot Seat segment of the week with Maegan Spivey. All right, welcome to the CE Hot Seat. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, Maegan, do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning ritual or lunchtime ritual, things that you do on a daily basis that contribute to you being a successful professional?
Yes. Well, one is I am pretty consistent in having a morning quiet time. For me, it's I read the Bible, and also I do it with coffee. That is really my favorite way to start the day. But then it's also going into, I use the Full Focus Planner. That's my favorite organization tool. And it helps me clarify my most important things that I need to get done for the day. And then everything else, it can get moved to another day. So if I can navigate those big three rocks, if I can clarify those and get those accomplished, my day is a lot better. The structure for the day is a lot better because it's not all responding to fire. There's also still a focus on the big rocks that need to get done that day.
Michael Hyatt, great stuff.
Oh,
with,
yeah,
the Full Focus Planner.
Michael. Okay.
I know Michael. Yeah. Love all that stuff.
Oh, good.
Next question. What's one book that you recommend to engineers, or just one book that you have found to be extremely helpful in your professional and or personal development?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see. Probably my professional has been Contract Redlining Etiquette. So
wow.
Nerdy.
I love it. Thinking back on your managers of the past, picture your favorite manager or managers. What made them your favorite?
I think the communication. Never assuming that communication happened. And then, so everything was clarified. Maybe not everything, but just that idea that making sure there was a mutual understanding. And then also too, my favorite managers have been ones that really stay in touch and stay in tune with what I'm working on, not in terms of trying to micromanage, but in terms of what can I how can I block you so that you can get your work done? What's getting thrown on your plate that I can help to keep things clear and really do my job well. And that's been those are my favorite.
I've got one final question. That is the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. If you got into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about 30 to 40 seconds with them, what career advice would you share with them?
Start posting on LinkedIn. Definitely.
Well, Maegan, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners connect with you?
On LinkedIn.
There it is.
Yep.
That was a great spot. So Maegan, appreciate your time today. And, like she said, connect with her on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Please remember you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your civil engineering endeavors.